All right, hello. Welcome to Backyard Catch. This is your host, Nick Roby. We have a special episode tonight. I have my good friend, Mr. Hank Stichter, on the line with us. How are you doing, Hank?
Doing good, Nick.
Good, good. Thanks for being on.
Yep, of course.
Uh,
Thanks for having me.
yeah, excited to get to have this time with you. So, Hank, why don't you give the people just some background, maybe some of our connection and just why you love sports. Like, why is that such a big part of your life, and some teams that you follow, and just how it's kind of integrated into just everything that you do. So,
Yeah,
take it
just
away.
giving the people what they want, you know.
Just give them what
But
they want. Strong, strong.
but yeah. So I guess I met you, Nick, when I was in high school.
Right. Yeah.
So you were my young life leader. And so I've grown up here in Charlotte, North Carolina, and so I've grown up a big Hornets and Panthers fan. Those are my two big teams
Hmm.
that I follow here professionally. And then my family, both sides are from Ohio, up near Columbus, and my mom went to Ohio State. So college wise, I'm a big Ohio State fan, and so have grown up kind of with Ohio State and then the Panthers and the Hornets, just following mainly them. A couple other teams that I like, but those are definitely the biggest ones. And then I've liked sports my whole life just because I've been a competitor and I'm a very competitive person, and so sports is something I just really got into, whether I was watching or playing. And so I was never kind of big enough to compete in football or basketball, which were my two favorite sports in high school. And so I think that for me, kind of watching and following the professionals and in college, following it is I get really into it because I wasn't able to compete in high school and stuff. So um, it's a big part of my life because of that, I think.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Yeah, Hank and I definitely bonded over some love of sports. We got over the Michigan Ohio State rivalry though, because at first, because my mom went to Michigan, and
Yeah. Oof.
so I know. So we're still friends through it, I think.
We are, which really goes to show how good of friends that we are, is that since we're able to overcome that, you
I
know?
mean, I'm glad you can even say Michigan, because I know that Ohio State fans aren't even allowed to like say or write the letter M.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I'm glad that we can move
Yeah.
do
It's
that
just
as
that
well.
team up north.
The team up north, I know. Um, and so I'm a Clemson fan first, but uh,
Ugh. Ugh.
Michigan's like just another team I kind of follow as well.
Mhm.
My mom went there, so but yeah, Hank and I, it's pretty cool to see him doing his thing now, and we get to continue to share the love of sports together and follow all the teams. What would you say out of those three, with Ohio State, the Panthers, and the Hornets, who would you be the most excited for if they won the title or won the championship?
Um, I would probably say I would be most excited if the Panthers won it, just
Okay.
because um, being an Ohio State fan, like I've seen them on that stage before. And so I would say I'm probably the biggest, like the out of those three teams, Ohio State's probably the one that I'm the biggest fan of. But I think seeing the Panthers kind of on that stage, and kind of reaching that level of success, I would be the most excited about, just because I haven't seen them win a Super Bowl. I mean, no one has. Um, and I just think that would be kind of the coolest to see. I don't typically expect too much out of the Hornets, and so
No, the Hornets are
um,
the Hornets are just like the little like side sports team you kind of love to cheer for, but they're in this.
yeah,
We're gonna talk about them later. What do you do with the Hornets? But yeah,
yep.
I
And
thought
so I think I expected a little more out of the Panthers, and so seeing them win a Super Bowl is definitely something I would like to see. Hopefully this year. Cam said so. So
yeah, yeah. It'd be cool. They were so close a couple years ago. I really thought that was gonna be the year,
oh
like in the
yeah,
50th. I mean, I that still is like, it was crazy that they just kind of fell apart in the first bit, and then they just couldn't come back against the Broncos.
hmm
But
Yeah. And we would have one if it wasn't for the Patriots cheating, So
right.
I'm
Yeah.
not salty or anything, but
No. Well, I mean, considering that Tom Brady also has a bubble around him at all times,
yeah, that helps.
that helps. I don't know. Side note, we're not gonna get into all this, but it's still crazy that he is still playing this well and like won what 6 titles now, or is he at 5?
Uh,
I
he's
think
at he's at 5.
he's at 5. I don't know. You lose count, but it's just like
You really do.
he's 41 and he's like still winning titles, and I think it's still crazy. But
Mm-hmm.
anyway, um, well, cool. Thanks, Hank. I mean, so it's just been fun. I
Update: he
wanted
has won 6 Super Bowls.
He's won 6. We said we have live research now being done
Yep.
too. Doing 6. So, um,
Sorry
yeah,
to the no Patriots fans we have listening to this.
yeah. No, it's fun. It'd be really cool to see the Panthers win, and just because also like even just in pretty much our lifetimes, they're a team that's been started. So to see them finally make it over to the top would be really cool.
Mm-hmm.
And just how hard it is to actually get to the Super Bowl. I feel like
Absolutely.
in the NFL, I think it's one of the harder sports for you to actually to have all your players there, then be healthy and make it to that stage just to play for it, and then to go over to the top.
As well
But
as to just maintain that level of success.
right, and then again try to do it again
Mm-hmm.
is just really tough. So, oh well, good to know. Um, so really wanted to bring Hank on because he is big into the NBA as well and knows a lot of stuff, especially with college and then with the pro too. And really just I feel like with the NBA season ending and then now we're in this like the NBA MVP pageant isn't officially over. And now we are into this movement of players that's going to kind of start.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as it hits July 1st, it's going to be this like crazy of just signing people, and it's crazy. It's already time for this again, but I feel like the NBA offseason is almost as big as now even the regular season or the playoffs, just to like know where players are going and just
Oh,
it's a
absolutely.
huge talking point. And so wanted to kind of stop there. So Hank, well, first off, were there any like takeaways that you had from the regular season or things that are just that kind of stood out or just were memorable as the season's now officially over?
I would say the most intriguing thing for me over the season was probably just the city of Los Angeles as a whole. I think with LeBron moving to the Lakers, everyone thought that they were going to be a contending team. I mean, they had LeBron and then all these young pieces, but they really just fell apart. Just because of, I mean, I chalk it up to just poor leadership. Between I mean, you have Luke Walton, who isn't the best coach, and then Magic Johnson also just kind of
That
not making his younger pieces feel loved and just putting I feel like too much of a focal point on LeBron when it's almost like I don't think you really have to say that you're building around LeBron. Like he's the best player in the NBA and has been for 10 years.
so
Or
it kind of goes without saying that you're gonna try to do your best to work around
yeah, exactly. And
what he brings to the table.
so just coming out publicly and saying that basically everyone outside of LeBron is on the table. I mean, that doesn't bode well for having a successful team if players are like, why am I expending all this effort if I might just be traded in a matter of days or weeks,
Right, right,
And,
and you've already got this weird dynamic of player. It's kind of like this said unsaid of players don't always love playing with LeBron, just
mm-hmm,
because of the spotlight thing. Like when the team does well, he gets more of the credit, and when the team doesn't do well, the other pieces get more of the blame. And you have this young
absolutely.
core, and you have this young core in LA who was kind of being built up, and then they bring in LeBron, so they kind of get that spotlight kind of taken away from them in that
Mm-hmm.
sense. So yeah, it
It's
was
a
a
very
weird
weird
dynamic.
dynamic and just
Yeah.
did not work out for them, especially considering kind of the expectations that were set at the start of the season.
Mm-hmm.
But then you kind of look at the reverse with the Clippers, and they had a ton of success for not having a whole lot of pieces on their team.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, you could argue that it was Doc Rivers' best year yet as a coach. Even, I mean, you look at the Celtics teams that he had a ton of success with, and they had tons of pieces. And I mean, you think of the big three they had out there in Ray Allen and Garnett and Paul Pierce. And I mean, I mean, coaching any team to a championship is impressive, but um, he had a lot of pieces out there. Whereas here with the Clippers, the fact that they made the playoffs with not a whole lot. I mean, trading Tobias Harris throughout middle of the season and having him be one of your best players through that point is like, wow. I mean, really just exceeding expectations.
And they didn't drop off either. It
They
wasn't
really
like
did.
once they found their groove again, they made the playoffs and still and put up a fight against the Warriors too.
Yeah.
It wasn't even like they just like laid an egg once they made the playoffs.
Especially like with kind of going into what a lot of people thought was going to be a rebuilding season for them, or kind of just, not a whole lot of pressure was going to be on them because they were going to try and pursue one of the big free agents this offseason. Like, I don't think anyone was expecting a whole lot. And so for them to get where they did was very impressive to me, especially considering how much the Lakers failed. And so that whole dynamic in LA was surprising and amusing to me all at the same time this past season.
That was good. I think also it comes on with that was, do you remember at the beginning the whole mural thing in LA where
Oh,
they're like
yeah.
they're like the king is coming to LA, the king of LA, and then this guy makes this. It was a pretty cool mural. I thought it was like a cool way to welcome him and
It
just
was
like a
great.
fun.
Yeah.
It was great, and then people like messed with it, defiled it, and then they're like, okay, and then they did that again, and then they made another one, and then they messed it up again.
Yep.
It was just like, it was one of those moments you're like, this is why we can't have nice things.
It
Like,
was
why can't you just let them?
absolutely one of those moments.
You're like, why can't we just leave that it's a mural? It's like, it's okay. This whole like Kobe thing, and it's just like, I don't know. Laker fans are really interesting to me with that. The ones that like loving Kobe, but then I feel like they've had. I guess what I'm saying is they've had an interesting. It's been interesting to watch from afar them having love of past people like Kobe and Shaq, and I've heard other people say this, but then you have LeBron, who like is his own thing outside of a team, and then coming in and trying to figure out that whole dynamic. I feel like took a few months for him to actually feel like he was on the team, and then now, I
Yeah.
mean, now he feels like he's on the Lakers, but it felt like it was a weird in my mind to get used to that whole thing of LeBron being in purple and gold.
Yeah. It is definitely interesting to get used to, especially like with my family being from Ohio and kind of being like when I was first starting to get into the NBA, I liked the Cavs a lot. And that was when
Right.
LeBron was originally on them.
Right.
Then he like, and then he kind of did the whole thing. He went to the Heat, and I just remember hating him. And then like he came back to the Cavs, and it just wasn't the same. I was like, I still hate this guy. Like even though I like the Cavs, I don't feel like I can cheer for them with like him and on the team. Like it is weird how LeBron just almost seems like his own entity, like separate from whatever team he is on.
Yeah. No, I get that. And yeah, I might think he's a great player, but for me, that dynamic of like I said earlier, of him getting a lot of credit, but then it's always other people's fault. Like when things go wrong, like that kind of rubs me the wrong way sometimes.
Yeah.
But you can't deny. I mean, he's a great player, and he's done a lot for that city too.
Absolutely.
And he brings a title. Like he brings a lot to the table. I think just sometimes the way he goes about things, I don't personally always like. But at the same time in my mind, I'm like, okay, you know what? But he also his background, he didn't come up from a whole lot, and the way he is now, basically just his biggest knock is just him doing that whole decision thing on TV. Like that's his big thing, and that's not even really a thing.
Yep.
Like, you know what I mean? Like that's the big knock against him. And so anyway, it's just that whole dynamic's been really interesting. So I think that's a good one. I think the whole now that we're in more of a completion mode of this trade,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's become more and more intriguing. But the whole Kawhi for DeMar DeRozan
Yes.
deal, like Kawhi was hurt all of last like year before this past season,
Mm-hmm.
and it was this weird back and forth. Like the doctor, he went to a couple doctors, and then his team is like, no, he can play. He's just like sitting out because he's
Yeah.
mad and wants a bigger contract. And Kawhi doesn't say anything, and his uncle's one talking. That was one of
Yep.
those moments. Like it's better. I think in general, it's better to kind of let like you don't want to say too much, but I think he should have said something.
Mm-hmm.
Just put something out there that was from him.
Yeah,
It just
because
got
no one knew what was going on, really.
right, and it was just like and when no one knows, they're just going to fill in the blanks, and then eventually that became you know what I mean?
Yeah, it was just a lot of wild speculation from a lot of
Which
different people.
eventually there becomes a narrative, and fair or not. So I think this past year it was cool to see him become more the player that we all thought he could be and was,
Mm-hmm.
and fulfill that. And then in Toronto, which was so interesting because the whole DeMar and Kyle Lowry like brotherhood, and then how much they love DeMar, and then shipping him off for this 1 year. How good is Kawhi? Can he even play?
Yeah.
A full season, or is he going to be back to himself? And then you don't even know if he's going to stay there because people don't usually go to Toronto unless they get drafted there.
Yeah.
It's not as much of a free agent place. And
Mm-hmm.
then, let alone that, and then I feel like they did a really good job resting him. Like they played him and then like rested him strategically.
Yep.
And they go through and win the NBA title. So you would say it's all worth it. But
Yeah.
last summer, this whole mood was very bold, and people were very,
Mm-hmm.
questioning it. So I don't know. I was just been impressed with their GM of how he was able to push all the right buttons, and then even switching head coaches too,
Yeah.
like which was not a
Which
top.
was interesting because, I mean, it wasn't like they were a bad team. They weren't getting to the championship, but they were putting together very consistent, like
Right.
high win percentage seasons.
It
Uh,
felt like it was the good to great thing. That's what it kind of felt like.
it definitely was. Yeah. Like
And it's,
they were a really good team, but they had just a cap on how high they could fly, basically.
Mhm.
And
Yeah. And I mean, and yes, granted, LeBron moving to the West, uh, them moving that barrier, I think helped
mhm,
for sure. But I think this team would have been different. Like
absolutely.
A Kawhi led team playing the Cavs with LeBron and what they had. I think I still see Toronto having come on top of that.
Yeah.
And they might have been more of a struggle for them. But anyway,
I
so
mean, Kawhi is one of the few players that could guard LeBron
mhm.
and not shut him down. I don't think there's a player that could, but I mean, basically could come the closest to that. Um,
Mhm.
and so,
Mm. There you go. I like that. Any other takeaways that are on your mind right now that you were thinking about?
not a ton.
Not a ton. Yeah, I mean, it definitely was like a lead up to the playoffs.
Yeah. A lot of stuff just kind of played out how I think people kind of thought,
Yeah.
with maybe a few teams either slightly exceeding or not exceeding expectations. Um, but I would say kind of the Lakers and the Clippers were probably the two teams that
Mhm.
underwhelmed and overwhelmed probably the most. So, and it's just kind of funny that they were in the same city.
Yeah. Mm. Yeah, I think that whole dynamic is really interesting. And now the Clippers are trying to move to where the old Forum is, right? Like where the original Lakers were. They're trying to move out there, which is interesting. I
Yeah.
The whole thing of them sharing a court, that whole idea, I don't love that. Me
Yeah.
personally, that's just like a personal thing. Like I didn't love. I think the Jets and Giants still do in the NFL. Like that just feels weird to me.
Mhm.
Like, do you have home court advantage? And it's like cities like New York and LA. It's like you already get two teams. Do you have to you know what I mean? At least you could have your own arena.
Yeah, like the Mets and the Yankees.
Yeah, it's like at least they have their own different place because it's a different part of the city.
Hmm.
But I don't know. And I guess, and granted, in New York, it's hard to find space for an NFL stadium.
Yeah,
I
and
get
I was
that.
about to say, I mean, it's definitely cost effective. So when you're looking at it from an owner's standpoint,
It makes sense. It's just me personally. It's just like, okay, if you're going to have two teams, at least You can have your own stadium, but
Yeah.
that's a side hot take mode. Let's see what other takes you want to listen to if you love sports all the things that they've been talking about. Is the Warriors dynasty done? Where does KD end up? Does Kawhi resign? Is LeBron the greatest player ever?
Yeah.
I feel like there's just all those type of themes that come out. Like I feel like I don't know about you, but you know what I mean? Like there's those type of stories I feel like people when talking about sports that they're gonna want to like start talking about. So we don't have to get into all that stuff, but
Yeah.
um but but really though, what did you think of the finals? Were you like surprised the Raptors won, or were you like
I wasn't surprised given the circumstances. I would have been surprised had they beaten a fully healthy Warriors team. I would have been surprised, but I mean, you just look at the Warriors. I mean, I'd feel bad for them if they hadn't won multiple championships leading up to
right,
this point.
right.
And so it was kind of like a breath of fresh air with the Raptors winning, but it was a little disappointing because you almost feel like there's an asterisk next to the Raptors win because
Yeah.
they didn't beat this like
They didn't beat the Juggernaut Warriors. You know,
yeah,
like the Dynasty Warriors. They beat like a team
they
that had those players, but it wasn't all together like it normally
exactly. And
is.
I
Yeah.
mean, to be fair, I mean, the Warriors were a championship level team before KD went there and Boogie Cousins and
Yeah.
so and so they were still playing a championship caliber team, but it was definitely not the same Warriors without KD for most of the time. And
Hmm.
then I mean Clay there at the end. I mean you could have made the argument that the Warriors would have won that final game that we saw
Yeah. I
had
thought
Clay not gone down earlier in it.
yeah, I thought that they would have gone at least to game seven. Just with that comeback win in game five. And
Yeah.
then, the Warriors at home, you don't think that they're gonna lose all three games at home of
Hmm.
a final series, but I mean that's what they ended up doing. But it just became too much for Steph to try to like do that, and they also just didn't have a bench either that could compete because they had to
And
spend all this other money.
and that's the downside of having kind of these super teams, you know? I mean, you have an injury or something, or you rely too heavily on one player and it doesn't pan out. And then it's like, well, who do you go to after that? And like you said, they had Steph, but I mean, there's only so much one player can do, especially at the point guard position. I feel like because I mean, you're playing against a very good defensive team too in the Raptors. Um,
Yeah,
and so it didn't work out in their favor, but I feel like given the circumstances, it wasn't too surprising. So
yeah. No, I agree, and I I personally think that if the Warriors hadn't signed KD, like if they had allocated the money they used for KD for like some other like pieces, that they could arguably be a better team. Not
yeah,
that KD isn't good, but just because of how much money you have to pay KD, like a KD.
yeah. I mean, you
Um,
could have like four or maybe even five like solid role players, or kind of just adding some depth.
mhm.
To
Yeah.
surround that team. And I feel like that was kind of how they reached that level of success. You know, it was like you had
Mm,
Steph and you had Clay and Draymond Green. But then you had players kind of backing them up, like you had Jarrett Jack, you had Iggy, you had just I mean a lot of good talent that surrounded them and just coming off the bench. You could give guys adamant amounts of rest um, I mean, you definitely depended on your stars, but it was like other guys could step up too
mhm.
on any given night,
Yeah.
and you just don't have that kind of dynamic anymore.
No, no. So it'll be interesting with what the Warriors end up doing next year, just because it
Mhm.
feels like it's not a rebuilding, but it's more of just how do they reload or how do they go about this again?
Yeah,
I feel like there's some
especially with Clay's ACL and then the Achilles with Durant. I mean, those are both major injuries that will play into a good part of next season.
Hmm. Yeah,
With
I
them
think
suffering so.
I personally think that the Clay injury is actually bigger for the
Oh,
Warriors
absolutely.
than and preface this, I don't want to see either of these guys hurt, but I think just when you look at it from like a analysis standpoint, KD was most likely already leaving anyway. So you're gonna
Mm-hmm.
leave up that cap space. You know what I mean? Like you were gonna obviously you'd want to try to resign him,
Yeah.
but all signs were kind of pointing to him most likely moving to like New York.
Yep.
Maybe LA, like the LA Clippers, but he was going to become a free agent. And so for the Warriors, I think you'd want to build off of Clay and Steph. But now that Clay's hurt, I think you still go after Clay and pay him, but it just you're going to lose a lot of chunk of the year without him. So it's like, how do
Yeah.
you rebuild the pieces around that? You know, so they're just going to have to do a
Mm-hmm.
lot of internal stuff. So it'll be interesting to see.
It will
Uh,
be. It's going to be a very different Warriors team from what we saw this past year.
yeah, yeah, and I think. But I think too, also it's another chance for us to see like how good Steph actually is, because I think we've
Mm-hmm.
gone through this like weird, not weird, but this like interesting ebb and flow with him. You're
Yeah,
like,
where it was like when they kind of first reached that kind of point of success, everyone was like, Steph is the man. Like, he is the best point
mm-hmm,
guard in the NBA. Like, I mean, as almost like unanimous. I mean, he won multiple MVPs. And
right,
now it's like, is he even the best player on his team? And I think, I mean, just defensively, teams are more keyed in on him. You just don't see like if he has a big night, it's just not talked about as much now. I mean, and he's not like I mean, it just seems like he we're not hearing about these just insane shooting performances that we used to
yeah,
hear about. It's more
mm-hmm,
it's almost turned into more of like a legacy thing. Like Clay is shooting this percentage over his career, or he's made this
mm-hmm.
many threes throughout his career, rather than kind of going off a night to night basis, which you hear about with a lot of MVP candidates and stuff.
Yeah, no, you really do, and yeah. So anyway, that's kind of just some highlights from the past season.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of just MVP and awards, what did you think about with the awards, like all that stuff? Like, did you think that it was the right guy for MVP? So MVP, Giannis won the MVP over James
Yes,
Harden and Paul George. Do you think he was the right guy?
absolutely. Um, I mean, you look at how he has changed the Bucks. I mean, it is just astronomical. I mean, because the Thunder, I mean, they were already pretty good. I mean, they had Russell Westbrook, who, I mean, averaged a triple double. I mean, you have the Rockets who, and James Harden's been like playing at a high level for them,
Mm-hmm.
kind of. I mean, right since he signed there, but it's not. If I just think of like who is the most like important to that team, like who is the most valuable player to their respective team, I think it's Giannis. I mean, you look at, I mean, he's a team player too. I mean, the whole team is just able to be kind of integrated and utilized kind of through him, rather than just James Harden, who is going to account for about 40% of your scoring on a given night or something. And
Yeah.
I mean, he can do it all. I mean, he's a good defender. He rebounds at a high level. He can
Mm-hmm.
score. He can. I mean, he brings the ball up. He can pass it. I mean, you just look. He can do so many different things. And he's such a prototypical player that it's like I thought it was just kind of no question he should be the one to win it.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. I think he was the right guy, especially after this year. I think
Mm-hmm.
you saw a step up for him. Like last year, you saw a step up in James Harden, but this year you really see that he stepped up the team, and Milwaukee like really did kind of cement themselves in the regular season as the best team in the East, and even
Absolutely.
overall, you could argue that they were the best team. Like there was a good argument there, and that's a huge part because of Giannis.
Yeah,
Because
and because it's also not like Milwaukee has one of these kind of super teams where they're going out and signing a bunch of guys just kind of on a year-to-year basis, just trying to have several superstars. It's really like Giannis and company up there.
hmm
Whereas like the Rockets is like they signed James Harden, but then it's like when they did, it's like, all right, we're like, but we also have Chris Paul. Like we're also going to try and bring in like another superstar. They're still like now they're looking
hmm
at trying to get Jimmy Butler in, and you look at it, it's like the Bucks are really not in conversation for any big free agents and haven't really been for a number of
no,
years. I mean,
I
they've really done a good job of. I mean, they've signed some guys, but it hasn't been like huge names, and they've done a lot through the draft. I mean,
hmm
um, and so I mean, I think you have to have one a lot of respect for how the Bucks have built that franchise up from. I mean, I remember when they were a joke. I mean, it was like um, they were just kind of stuck in that kind of 8 to 15 range in the NBA, and so they just weren't doing much. And it's like they drafted Giannis, and I remember there was a lot of talk because it was a big deal when he came over to play because a lot of people were kind of looking at him as a draft and stash type player.
hmm
Like he would play overseas for a couple more years because he was so young and he came over right away, and people were a little surprised by it. And I mean, you just look at his growth over the time that he's been in the NBA, and it has just been, I mean, it has
it's
been
impressive.
insane.
Yeah, yeah,
And so just showing that level of like kind of commitment to him has been impressive from the Bucks, and then to see him kind of definitely showing that payoff for kind of those decisions and waiting, um, like drafting him knowing that they would wait a couple years before he would reach his full
hmm
potential. And I don't think anyone thought he would be this good when he was drafted, but I mean, if
yeah,
they did, he would have gone a lot higher than he did. But
yeah. I mean, and and with the draft, I think it's I mean, these are like their best estimated guesses of like what these players are going to be. I think we can forget how actually difficult it can be to project. I
oh,
mean,
absolutely.
and these guys get paid lots of money to do that. And don't get me wrong, and there's more analytics now, and there's body types you can look for, and there's certain skills that you look for, but
Hmm.
you still miss. Like it's
Oh
still
yeah,
like you're taking your best
especially
shot with what's in front of you.
with foreign players or
Yeah,
kind of more
especially
raw
international.
talent. It's
hmm
like they have the tools to be great, but it's like will they pan out like we want them to? I think is the big thing for teams now. It's like how do you weigh kind of a project or a guy who has a high ceiling but also a very low floor, and how do you project that, especially with foreign players when you don't see them competing against the same level of talent that
hmm
players coming out of college have just competed against.
Right. Like in another example of this is Luca.
Hmm.
Luca Doncic, he won the rookie of the year, and he was definitely, I would say, the best rookie.
Oh,
But
absolutely.
when he was being drafted, it wasn't like a clear like this is the number one guy.
Hmm.
But he has like really established himself. I was really impressed with him, and he's just fun to watch. I would
He
say
really is.
he has this fun, like just joyful way of playing, um,
I think the
and
Mavericks
distributing the
have a
ball.
really good kind of
Yeah,
future laid out for them.
their core is like it's very intriguing because you got him and you got Porzingis and
Yep.
they have another foreign guy too. I think the joke was like they're the international team
Yeah. Which
of
is
the
funny
NBA.
because that has seemed to be like the Raptors almost for so many
The Raptors
years.
or the Spurs.
Or the
You
Spurs,
could
yeah.
argue the Spurs, yeah,
Absolutely the
but
Spurs.
that's the crazy thing. Again, another team in the West who's like very intriguing. You even have like the Kings
Hmm.
as well. There's so many teams in the West. It's pretty crazy. But yeah,
Yep.
Luca won Rookie of the Year. Lou Williams won Sixth Man of the Year.
Yep.
Rudy Gobert won Defensive MVP, and then Pascal Siakam of the Raptors won Most Improved. So
Hmm.
that's kind of like the big of the NBA awards.
Yeah. But I mean, you're also forgetting that Mike Conley, he did win both Teammate of the Year and the Sportsmanship Award.
mm,
So I think a lot of credit goes out to him as well on those awards. So
yeah, there you go. I don't. It, those ones are always interesting of like what they do. But in all seriousness, I have heard he's like a really great guy to play with, and
yeah, I mean, he's
um,
from Ohio State, you know. I mean, what
no
more do you
bias,
need to know?
no bias at all there. Uh,
Yeah.
but he just got traded to Utah, right? Is that right?
Yep.
Okay,
Yep. In the
that's what
draft.
in the draft. Yeah, there's so much happened with the draft. I was like, I can't even fully pay attention to this. And it was confusing because they're like, okay, they're being traded. Like the fourth pick's being traded to um was
The
being traded.
Hawks.
It was like traded to LA, or is LA's pick that's being traded to New Orleans, but New Orleans is already trading it to the Hawks, but it's not technical yet because it's not until the end of the month of when the NBA
Yeah,
season
and
starts. It's like, how am
I
I
feel
supposed to
like
follow
trades
that?
should be able to go through before the draft. That way, I mean,
It feels
it's
like
just weird that players are drafted by teams knowing that they're going to be going somewhere else, you know?
yeah, it's weird that it just doesn't feel like it flows as much as it should. Or
Hmm.
it's just a little confusing as a fan. Like honestly, like I have to mentally think, okay, Hunter from UVA is being drafted by the Lakers, but that was the pick of the New Orleans, but he's really going to play in Atlanta, you
Yeah.
know, but he's still
Yep.
going to wear LA stuff like
Yep.
on that night. And I think just as a fan, honestly, it's just a little confusing,
It
but
is.
try to keep up with. But I mean, I think we can follow, but it's just like I feel like we can be
We
able
can
to fix
follow,
that.
but I would also say, I mean, for like me, it's fairly easy because I like have this stuff in my head. But I would say for like a much more casual fan, I mean, they'd be like, "What is going on here?" You know, and
Hmm.
it's a very confusing system. And I think one that needs to be taken kind of they need to take a look at because I really don't think it would anyone would really fight having the um, just kind of the not deadline, but to have kind of the mark when teams can trade moved up a little bit, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, and you're talking about by maybe like a week or so.
Hmm.
Um, and I also like the NFL system where free agency is before the draft, because then teams kind of have a better idea of like, all right, here's like where we need help basically, and you've seen so many cases where um, a team will draft a player and they look really good, but then like they have a player as a bigger name at a different position leave, and then they're
Hmm.
like, oh well, now we have this big hole left here. Like, for example, when Paul Millsap left Atlanta, I can't
Hmm.
remember who they drafted that year off the top of my head, but I remember they drafted a player at a different position, and then there was just this gaping hole at power forward, and they're like, we need a big man, and they weren't able to draft one when there were plenty capable players at that position available when they were picking, and so I think I definitely like the system where you have free agency and stuff, and then you kind of look more at the draft.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's something for them to look into just because it also helps to kind of know where the holes are. Because now people have drafted all these players, and then, with the free agent frenzy that's probably about to happen, like a little carousel. And it'll just be
Hmm.
interesting to see how. And, the teams have to kind of figure out, okay, what do I do? And I guess if you know the system, you kind of draft kind of knowing who you're going after. But at
Yeah.
least the other way, when you get free agents first, you kind of, like you said, the holes you're going for. You can at least try to fill them in the draft. This
Yep.
way, it's a little harder because you more or less draft the best player. It's more of what this becomes is you just draft the
Yeah.
best player available, and then you try to go after the best free agent available, and then you just kind of make it work, you
Mm-hmm.
know, which is good if it works, but then you might not get the best flow of a team or even personality wise too. I think that's a
Yeah.
low. People don't think about that as much, but the personalities, it makes a difference when you have, because NBA teams are not that big. What is it like
12.
13, 12 guys?
Yeah. I mean, that you might see in a rotation.
Like you see in a rotation, like they have to work really well together.
Yeah.
So, but speaking of the draft,
Mm-hmm.
I think we can just part of what we also want to do is just kind of throw out some thoughts in this too. Um, and so, and if you've been paying attention to the NBA at all, you know that the first pick was going to be Zion.
Yeah,
That felt kind
absolutely.
of obvious. Like the more
I
the
mean,
watch,
really, the first two with Zion and then Ja Morant. Um,
yeah,
it was that
and
was
then
pretty much given.
yeah, like those two and RJ at three. Like you kind of felt
Hmm.
like those three were going to be the top
Yeah,
once taken. Maybe you take RJ and Ja might have switched, but
or
um,
like Darius Garland. I know there were some rumors about him going number 3 instead, um, but definitely at number 1 and 2, and then a highly assumed third pick. It was kind of what people kind of figured going into the draft that was going to be the
mhm.
outcome of those picks. And so after that, it got a little more interesting, um,
Right,
especially with all the trading that went on with that fourth pick that we
right,
talked about.
right, right. So out of those, well, let's just start here. Out of those three,
Mm-hmm.
who do you feel like which team do you feel like won out the best? Or like which player are you the most excited about in that new city?
I mean, I think it's easy to just kind of say Zion and be like, I mean, I think he was clearly the best player in this draft, and
Right.
possibly the best player we've seen coming out of college in a hot minute, really, and
Mm-hmm.
and especially kind of stepping into that role that AD just left behind, going to LA. And so I think so much of a focal point is going to be placed on him so early on because of the shoes he has to fill and just all the expectations surrounding him.
Right.
But honestly, I am probably more excited to be watching Ja Morant in
Yeah.
Memphis.
I was gonna say
Um,
that I feel kind of similar about that. Um, not as I.
Especially with Conley out now, I think there
Mm-hmm.
were some questions like if they are unable to trade Conley, I mean, it would seem absurd that they would either run both of them at the same time or bench Conley, who's been their main guy for so many years,
Mm-hmm.
um, in favor of kind of this younger, um, like product. But now that Conley's out of the equation, you have Morant in and going to be running the offense. And I think it's a good fit for him because that's exactly what he did in college. I mean, he was the focal point of that team. And
Mm-hmm.
um, he's very much used to kind of carrying the load and being the focal point of the offense. And so it'll be fun to see him. Plus, I always just love the guys from the smaller colleges too. It's always fun. I remember when Steph came out of Davidson, or
Mm-hmm.
you have Lillard out of Weber State. CJ McCollum. Um, yeah, I mean, just these guys from smaller schools. It's something that just makes you want to root for them.
Mm-hmm. No, I think it's good, and two, I think he and the city, I think fit really well together. I think
Mhm.
Memphis is a smaller market team,
Mhm.
but isn't there like their motto like Memphis, is it grit? Is something like that? Or it's just they're just very like, it feels like more of a blue collar,
Yeah.
like a smaller, like kind of like how Toronto is with their players, but Memphis is on like a smaller scale, I think, than
Hmm.
Toronto. But how much I feel like they could really support him and like he gets to develop, but not in this like huge spotlight.
Yeah,
Where
exactly.
where Zion in New Orleans is like, they're not as big of a basketball city, but they're a big like sports city, like with the
Hmm.
Saints. And now that he's going there, there's gonna be a huge spotlight on him there.
Yeah.
But Ja, I feel like could develop and really just have a fun time just enjoying playing basketball for a team, and then they get to surround him where he gets to distribute the ball. I think they could become a fun team.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Absolutely.
probably not next year, but like say that they get another high draft pick next year.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to be stocking up over the next few seasons, most likely. I mean, barring something incredible like John Morant is like automatically an MVP candidate or something like that. I mean, they're going to be drafting probably. I mean, probably top 8 the next
Mm-hmm.
2 or 3 seasons would be my guess.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not 3, but the next couple of seasons will probably be rebuilding for them. So,
No,
uh,
I think it's good. And so now we get into with the draft. After 3, we have
mhm,
DeAndre Hunter at 4, who's really going to play in Atlanta. And Atlanta's another interesting team. I think that you've got Trae Young, and you've got Cam Reddish, and you've got uh, Hunter. And they
mhm.
already had a couple pieces. Like they'll be interesting. Like I think that they're going to be another one of those teams that's going to feel like more like a team.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see the dynamic of with Hunter and Reddish, like if all these guys can mesh and become a team,
Mhm.
or is you know what I mean? Like I think it's more of like if the personalities can fit, they can work really well together, or
Absolutely.
they could be a lot of young guys trying to jostling for position, and where it just becomes like an awkward, like okay, like we need to get rid of one of these guys because they're not going to really
Mhm.
flow into it. Um, like what else stood out to you about the draft? Was there anything else that kind of caught your eye? I mean, we're going to talk about
Yeah.
the Hornets, but was there anything else that
Well,
you
I would
really?
say the team that I thought did the best in the draft, I thought that I was blown away by how well the Cavs drafted.
Yeah.
And I know that's easy to say with having 3 picks in the first round, but I mean, you look at, I mean, the Pelicans also had 3 picks in the first round, and I
Hmm.
liked what the Cavs did a lot more. So just kind of going down, with the 5th pick, they drafted Darius Garland, who, I mean, is possibly the best pure scorer at guard in this draft class. And so, I mean, I know we kind of got much a much smaller sample size from him, since he got injured so early on in the season at Vanderbilt.
Hmm. Yeah.
But I mean, the flashes he showed. I mean, he's going to be a very good player in the NBA and just a very elite scorer. And
Hmm.
then, but then they also drafted probably my favorite player in the draft at 26. They drafted Dylan Windler out of Belmont,
Hmm.
and I I love Dylan Windler. Like I thought this guy was the real deal, and I think he kind of solidified that come the NCAA tournament. But
Hmm.
he just reminds me so much of Klay Thompson when he was coming out of college. I mean, he's similar build. He's a shooting guard, but he's a 6'7".
Right.
I mean, he shoots the ball. I mean, he shot. I believe it was like 42 or 43% from 3-point land
Hmm.
this past season, which was higher than what Klay shot at Washington State. And then he rebounds at a high level for his position. He averaged over 10 rebounds a game. And his averages were higher than Klay's, but he also wasn't playing in the Pac-10
Hmm.
like Klay did. And so, but he was just he's a very fun player to watch and can just kind of a very natural scorer and a great shooter and just kind of has that size for his position where he's going to be hard to guard. And so getting him at 26, I thought was really good. I think he has a pretty high ceiling for that point in the draft, which I also felt that way about their last first round pick. They traded back up into the end of the first round at 30 and got Kevin Porter Jr. out of USC.
Hmm.
And I feel like that's another guy. He has a very high ceiling for that point in the draft. and just kind of a good two-way kind of guard forward combo. They have a lot of flexibility between him and Windler, whether they want to play him at shooting guard or small forward. They can kind of have some fun with some lineups and stuff. But I think those three players, they really just kind of, you could tell they just focused on really stacking their backcourt with this draft. And I thought they did a great job with that. And I think it's going to be a really fun kind of young group of scorers to watch this upcoming season and for the next couple seasons if they can live up to the potential.
Right, and then because you also have Cam Sexton, who's like just finished his first year, so it feels like there's a lot of young talent in the NBA, which is pretty fun. And then there just feels like a lot of teams are like, okay, that'll be interesting, or like that'll be cool to see, like those guys fit together.
Yep.
You also got another one. Shout out to Grant Williams. Is from Charlotte, and he got drafted 22, which is pretty cool. Like, it's just cool to see guys that you've seen play live, and they're like, oh yeah, like.
Absolutely. Especially because Grant Williams, I mean, he was playing high school ball here in Charlotte when I was in high school, and so it was like, I mean, you're in high school and you're hearing about this great player at like another high school a few miles down the road, and then it's like they go and they're star at Tennessee, and then they get drafted by the Celtics. I mean, one of the most historic teams out of any of the major sports, and it's just crazy to see. And similar with Steph, really. I mean, he played high school basketball about 4 miles from where I live, and so I mean, just kind of these local players getting drafted high. It's always fun to see.
Yeah. No, it is cool, and you do wish these guys good luck with all this too. Wanting these guys to do well. Okay, so another segment we wanted to do was just to talk about the Hornets, since we're both Hornet fans, especially you, Hank. And what did you think of the Hornets draft? Like, let's just start there. What did you think? I guess first you start off at 12 with them getting PJ Washington. What do you think of that pick there?
I'm fine with that pick. What I would love to see them do is kind of package that pick with one of their big contract guys to try and get rid of a big contract. That was kind of the only way I saw them unloading a guy like Nick Batum or Marvin Williams or someone like that to create some cap space. But even with the 12th pick, that would kind of a lot to ask because there weren't a ton of big names left on the board at that point. But keeping the pick, I love PJ Washington. Charlotte's kind of always been missing like a big guy, and we're kind of notorious for drafting just either forwards who are just purely to kind of stretch the floor, or like, I mean, you think Frank Kaminsky, or I mean, and then, or just like a pure defensive guy. I mean, going back to like Bismack Biyombo, and so they've never really had kind of a two-way like power forward or center like that I can remember, and so I think they're kind of caught on to they need a player like that in their lineup, and I think PJ Washington, if he can stay healthy and kind of live up to his potential, I think he could be that player for the Hornets. And also he's just a kind of, I've heard he's a good attitude kind of guy and a hard worker. And so I always appreciate players like that coming to the teams I pull for. And I thought he was the best player on the board at that pick. And so I didn't feel like, I feel like there's not a lot of risk with it too, which the Hornets can sometimes, you're like, oh my gosh, like what did they do? Specifically looking at Frank Kaminsky and like Bismack Biyombo and Cody Zeller. I mean, just several picks that like just kind of left the whole city like with a little pain in their stomach, kind of. And so it's good to just kind of have like a low risk player. He can build up into something productive and be a starter kind of for the foreseeable future. You kind of know what you're getting with him. And so I
Yeah.
like the pick.
Good. Yeah. I think you're right. That's the tricky part with them being at like 12 is
Mm-hmm.
that you can't really usually the top players like the slam dunks,
Mm-hmm.
pun intended. The more of those guys like they're gonna go, and then the you're kind of stuck in this like okay, like there's some good guys, but there's also a reason they're at 12 or 13. You
Yeah.
know, like they're
Like
just
they
good.
might have like a lot of talent, but they also carry a lot of red flags with them.
Yeah, or they like have say out of like five skills you would want, they have like three of them or two
Mm-hmm.
really strong ones. They just don't have like four.
Yeah.
And I think that's the hard part with Charlotte is that they just haven't had after Kimba anyone else to pair him with. That's like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, this is for sure the number two guy. Like we know these are our guys. We're gonna build around this. It's kind of been this like, at least from my perspective, just this circle of like, okay, we're trying to feel out how do we like continue to make ourselves better, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Because basically
Yeah,
they're in.
and you have like a season without Jefferson or a season with Nick Batum that like is like, okay, man, like we kind of have a number two guy now. But
Mhm.
then it doesn't really extend much further than kind of that one season.
Right.
Um, and so, yeah, I think, and now, I mean, you're not necessarily drafting PJ to play alongside Kemba necessarily. But
Yeah. Yeah.
it's a guy
It's
with little red flags and um
yeah, like not like for me it doesn't seem anything like bad. It's just more of what do you like what he's bringing to the table,
mm,
and
yeah.
then what you're trying to build around and go for. Um so all right, Hank, I'm gonna throw this out there. If you say you are now the GM for the Hornets,
Yep.
Kemba, his contract, it's coming up. It's kind of big news around town.
Yep.
He's not this like hidden secret anymore around the NBA. People
Mm-hmm.
kind of know who he is. And he's kind of like this marquee guy of a free agent. Okay, he could be this other big piece this other team's looking for to really make a championship run next year. So if you're
Yeah.
going to try to keep him, you really have to pay top dollars for him, which could be good to keep him, but then it just takes up a lot of cap space.
Yep.
Like, do you want to be paying him 38, $40 million a year, or do you let him go trying to build around him? So if you were the
Mm-hmm.
GM, what do you do with Kimba Walker?
So the problem with Charlotte is that their former GM Rick Cho, uh I mean he was just awful. I mean he was a terrible GM. I mean, and so we have we already have tons of money wrapped up in not very good players for this season and then even some next season as
Mm-hmm.
well. And so there's only so much you can do. And I kind of, the talk around town is like, and I read this, I can't remember if it was from the Charlotte Observer or ESPN, but one of the focal points of Michael Jordan's being the owner is to not have Charlotte move into that luxury tax
Mm-hmm.
and to keep his salary under that. But I think with a player like Kemba, I would absolutely sacrifice going into the luxury tax for a season or two to keep him on our team, because the thing is Charlotte's not gonna be a market that's gonna attract players of that caliber. And
Right.
so you're basically like, this is the one opportunity we're gonna get to sign a player of this level. And so by letting him go, you're basically just kind of saying goodbye to your chances of signing a first team all-star, because Charlotte's just not a market that attracts that talent.
Yeah.
Um, And would I love for it to be? Yeah. Yeah, that'd be fun. But I mean, just looking at it is not. And so the only way we would attract someone like that is if we were already a team that was putting together like solid seasons and could potentially be a contender. And someone would be like, oh, I want to play alongside Kemba and try and win a championship there. And so I think we're not going to do that without Kemba. And so it would be a huge disappointment. And it's looking like, I mean, to no fault of Kemba's, that he is going to be leaving. But I would definitely pay up for him. And he even said that he would take, like, not necessarily sign the full supermax contract that Charlotte would offer. He said he would take less than that, which I think is really admirable, that you're willing to work with staying on one of the worst teams in the NBA.
Or one of the worst situations is.
Definitely one of the worst situations. I mean, I feel like we've just been stuck in this NBA purgatory for so many years. It's like, if we make the playoffs, we're going to make it as an 8 seed and then just get obliterated in the first round.
Right.
But we're also not so bad that we're going to be drafting top 5 for a few years and kind of restocking. And so, and it's like, when we have been drafting top 5, it's been in just terrible draft classes. And so it's like you pick Michael Kidd-Gilchrist at 2 when you miss out on Anthony Davis, and then you draft Cody Zeller at 4. And I mean, just not good situations kind of all around that the Hornets have been in for just years now. And so it's almost like, well, if we want a shot in the immediate future, the obvious move is to re-sign Kemba. But if, like, you're looking to rebuild, don't re-sign him, and just, we'll be real bad for a few years, which honestly, I mean, here in Charlotte, we're kind of used to, but we might get the chance to draft some pieces that would help us a lot down the line. So,
yeah, I think it's one of those. It's one of those, you either have to go for it or you have to just let it go, But this middle ground, it gets a little. I feel like it gets a little tiring from a fan's perspective too. You're like, okay, I want to like really go after this team and believe in it, but it's hard when, they're kind of in this middle ground of, not getting picks or not, and it's this weird. And the way the NBA works, it's like it kind of rewards teams for kind of throwing, either them going after it or them kind of throwing in the towel for the year and try to get a high draft pick,
It definitely does.
And like that's what the Knicks did. And yes, they didn't win the number 1 overall pick, but they got their 3rd pick and they got RJ Barrett, who's going to be a good player, Yes, Zion's the best player, but RJ's like not a scrub. He can play. And so it's hard to know. I think, I guess with the contracts the way they are, I guess I would kind of lean towards letting him go. But it's hard because he's been the face of Charlotte for so long. That, like, you're like, okay, he's definitely our guy. And it's hard to let that go. So.
Absolutely.
And maybe
really wherever he goes, I feel like Charlotte fans are going to be forever Kemba fans. Because he hasn't done anything to, like, say, like, oh, like, I want out of this bad situation. Like, he's always been just, like, a good guy and a good face for Charlotte. He's never wrapped up in any controversies or anything. He's never, like, making fans upset. I mean, I ran into him once I used to work at a movie theater, and I mean, just kind of interacting with him kind of briefly. I mean, he's a super nice guy, and you just don't always get that with kind of like people of kind of that level of fame or, and so it would be sad to see him go, but it's hard to know what would be the best move for Charlotte in the long run. Either letting him go and kind of tanking, or re-signing him, but also potentially staying in that middle ground for a few years.
Yeah, yeah. So it'll be really interesting to see what he what they'll end up doing. I think they'll end up offering him a big contract, and it's really my guess is they're going to kind of leave the ball into his court. It's kind of what it seems. They're going to offer it to him,
Yeah,
and really,
also
it's
pun
just
intended.
yes, also pun intended. We are very much about puns on Backyard Catch. Um, so I think they'll be good. What did you think of their other couple picks? I mean, they had a couple more in the second round. Did they stand
Yeah,
out to you?
I liked Cody Martin. I was very much on kind of the early season Nevada bandwagon this year. I thought they were a really fun team to watch, even though they didn't quite live up to expectations. But
Right.
I really liked the Martin twins there. And
Yeah.
what's that?
No, I was agreeing with you. Yeah, I mean they were fun to watch. It's interesting that uh, only one of the twins gets drafted, though. I mean, obviously they're not the same player, but
Yeah.
they're very similar, and so
Yeah.
it's
I
interesting
mean,
that
and
one
you
got.
think about it like with, I mean, the Morris twins coming out of Kansas a few years back. I mean, they were drafted relatively kind of in similar positions. And then you think of the Lopez twins coming out of Stanford, even a little further back, were also drafted pretty similar spots. And so to have one drafted and then the other one not, it's interesting. So granted, that was with Blake Griffin and I think it was Taylor Griffin at Oklahoma. They both played together.
That's true.
And then obviously Blake being the standout out of the two.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so I liked that pick. I'm trying to think. Jalen McDaniels was we drafted him down at 52. I'll be honest, I don't know a whole lot about him. I know he played
No.
at San Diego State, but I wasn't following San Diego State a whole lot this season, so can't speak too much to that pick. But
Yeah.
definitely big fan of Martin.
Yeah, and I think too. Like I think Martin, I think is gonna be a good solitary. He's just one of the, like I think he'll be a good. It seems like they went more of like good consistent
Mm-hmm.
pieces. Like you kind of know a little bit more what you're getting. Like the ceiling might not be as high if you hit, but like I think it's more of the like you're saying before, the lower bar is you just kind of know what you're getting. And
Yeah.
also too, in the second half of the second round, you're really just kind of throwing out picks to see if you can get like a Draymond Green or somebody,
Mm-hmm.
or Isaiah Thomas, who's like a late round. Okay, we're just gonna see what we get, and it's okay if they don't
Yep.
pan out, but you're more going on like if there's one trait they have, or if they're really athletic, you kind of go after that, or
Mm-hmm.
like
Or
Kyle
just
Guy,
like these high ceiling, like foreign guys or something.
like
You
Kyle,
see that a lot.
like Kyle Guy going to the Knicks at 55.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's gonna be a really good pick for them, and to pair him up with RJ Barrett,
Mm-hmm.
having
Well,
that shooter.
but the Knicks are trading that pick to the Kings, though.
Oh, they are. See, I can't even keep focusing.
So further confirmation on why trades need to be able to go through before the draft.
Yeah, I don't even know. Now I'm showing. So I don't know all this NBA stuff, but I still enjoy it. But anyway, if he goes to the Kings, then
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think that's even a great pick too, because the Kings are really fun to watch too. So
Yeah.
I just mean that kind of a pick. I think like he's a winner, and you could tell his leadership
Mm-hmm.
when they won the national championship. So I think that plays a big role in it too. So it's really interesting to see how these guys will pan out, and then summer league will be fun to watch.
Mm-hmm.
See how these guys kind of battle back and forth. But there you go. So
Yep.
another draft come and gone. Yeah. So any other thoughts?
Um, Not a ton.
Okay.
Just kind of
Yeah.
going back to the draft real quick. Another team I liked. I liked the Hawks trade.
Oh yes. We wrote that down to talk about the Hawks.
I liked that trade up to 4. I felt like, um, they were able to move up and get DeAndre Hunter, who seemed like he was their guy that they wanted, and they had both the 8th and the 10th pick, and they were able to keep one of those. I assumed kind of trading up into that top 5, they were going to have to package both of those picks, but they were able to just kind of trade the 8th pick, keep the 10th pick, and get Cam Reddish, who's another good player. They ended up trading the 17th, which at that point, there's not a ton of value, at least in comparison to drafting Hunter at 4.
Right.
I mean, that's giving up almost nothing in comparison. And then early 2nd round pick, I thought they really got the better end of that trade and was impressed with how they pulled it off. From the Pelicans' point of view, though, I would have loved to see them kind of stay at 4 and draft either DeAndre Hunter or get Jarrett Culver or someone. I thought that would have been a lot more help to kind of what they're building there. But I'm not an NBA GM. I don't know exactly what they were looking for in the draft. They got Jackson Hayes at 8, and so
I think it's a win, and honestly too, when you get Zion, you pretty much have you've satisfied your fans.
Oh yeah, you're definitely not a loser in this draft if you're the Pelicans.
and they got some good pieces in the AD trade. Like
they're
gonna have a fun core. Like honestly, just to talk about it for a tiny bit, they got more pieces back than I thought they would. Like I think they were like they incredible. I've been impressed, like what they held out and waited for the right deal, and for the Lakers to get a little more desperate to try to make a big move in LeBron's little window that he has with them.
Yep.
And they're building something there. I think is really good, and they also got stuff from AD. They got value for him, and now he's happy. He's gonna be happier, but they got value back for him, which I think is gonna be a big thing. And you have guys with chips on their shoulders too.
Oh, absolutely. And I think you look at them in comparison to kind of like we talked briefly about Memphis and Ja Morant and kind of how they're going to spend a couple more years rebuilding. I mean, the Pelicans, they're probably not going to be contending this year, but I mean, they could put up a fight. I mean, we could see them like as potentially a 4 or 5 seed if everyone kind of plays to the level that kind of they could. I mean, we could see them being a real competitive team in the NBA this season, which is cool.
Yeah. I mean, and again, you just think about, I just keep thinking of these teams. You're like, okay, Memphis is in the West. New Orleans is in the West. You have the Kings who are rebuilding. Are going to be a power too. You have the Clippers who are rising. And you're like, man, like the West is so strong. It'd be interesting. It's another topic for another day. But like, what does the NBA do? Do you keep the system the way it is, or do you start trying to tinker with trying to just putting the best team, like the best quality teams in the playoffs versus
Absolutely.
like when you have like the West being so much stronger, or it's been historically. I mean, obviously the Raptors just won in their finals, but like we're talking about like 4 teams in the East, 5 maybe.
Oh, I mean, and it was even worse before this past season. I mean, you had like the Cavs, especially with the Bulls and Knicks and Celtics not being as good recently as they have been historically. I think is a big thing because you looked at it. I mean, up until this year, the Bucks weren't contending for anything, and I mean, so you had like the Cavs and then the Raptors, and it really just was a huge drop off after those 2 teams.
Yeah,
like kind of before this season, and so it was even a bigger discrepancy. I would say the Bucks have kind of closed that gap a little bit, but yeah, it is something that would be interesting to see if they looked at.
Yeah, so I feel like there's a lot of stuff like that would be really interesting for the NBA to really ponder. And they're also a league that really does consider that. I feel like they really put things on the table to really, they're not going to just keep doing the things the same way because they've just been doing them that way.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, so that there's kind of a recap of the draft and just some different moves that are probably going to happen. Just a little bit of just fun talking about Charlotte and just what do you do in that type of situation.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, Hank, thanks so much for being on. This was really fun. I'm
Yeah,
glad we got
thanks
to
for
do
having
this.
me.
Yeah, of course. I'm glad we got to finally do this. This is really fun.
Yep.
So, um, thanks y'all for listening. Again, please subscribe, like, share this with your friends. If you have friends who love sports and love just hearing sports talk, whether it's on the radio or through podcasts, or just love talking through different ideas, please share this with them. You can find us at backyardcatch.com. We're on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all of the different social medias of the millennials day. Pretty much whatever you would want to find, we're there. But seriously, yeah, tell us what you like. Do you think Kimba should stay? Do you think he should go? What do you do in those different situations? So anyway, just wanted to put that out there. Definitely share and pass this along to people who might love it. So anyway, Hank, thanks so much for being on. And
Yep. Thank you, Nick.
yeah, you're welcome. Okay, thanks for listening. And for now, we're signing off.